For a while, I've been pretty stuck on how I want to make this video. The Bachmann in-scale Thomas is something I've already reviewed, and while yeah, the video was pretty short, it highlighted how I felt about the model pretty well. Most of what I said still stands. However, when I first had the model, it could pretty easily be said I didn't really appreciate it as much as I could've. Oftentimes I would cite it for my 009 engines, and eventually was knocked off of my train table by one of my cats. Being so small, you can imagine the model didn't survive the fall. Well, as I said a while ago, recently I've been getting more into in-scale, and it was then the regret of that kinda started to set in. But thankfully, that all has recently changed. After a little bit of model trading with Marvin Signalbox, I finally got my hands on a new Bachmann in-scale Thomas. Well, actually two. One came from the homie Lego Master. But we'll talk a little bit more about this guy here shortly. In today's video, I wanted to take a second look at the Bachmann in-scale Thomas, and see if the model after all of this time still holds up, maybe correct some things I got wrong in the last review, and finally do what I said I was going to do in this poll. So let's go ahead and get into it. Some of you guys may remember a smaller series I did a while ago called Bachmann's Best, where I would take what I thought was the best of the Bachmann Thomas & Friends line, and do a sort of special review on them. Well, to tap kinda back into that, the Bachmann in-scale Thomas is frankly the best Bachmann product you can get from this line. And you've never heard me say that before ever, or at least at this point I would argue it's definitely up there. I've seen a lot of people complain about the size of this model, saying that it's too small to properly scale to in-scale. And to that I'd say, no, not entirely. This thought process often comes from being compared to the Tomix Thomas line, which in itself is not a bad line in the slightest. However, these models are actually scaled up, and made to appear larger when compared to other Tomix models, since these are often narrow gauge. The Bachmann in-scale Thomas is scaled to actual in-scale scaling. If I say scaling one more time, I swear, you'd be completely forgiven for thinking this. I honestly thought the same thing at first. But hopefully that little bit of context brings a little bit more understanding to this model. Aesthetically, this thing beats out the HO or OO model by a long shot, basically excelling in every department the previous lacked. At the moment, mine is wearing a custom bracing face, which is made by Rexecutions, but the standard face itself really isn't that bad. Maybe not the most accurate, but leagues better than this. There's also the fact they added a little bit of black paint to his side tanks, so we don't have to do it. And there's even a small indentation that continues around the front of the tank itself, so if you wanted to paint the front, you totally could. The inner workings of this model are quite simple but very smooth, and I can't say I've ever had an issue with this guy running prior falling off a table. And the fact they managed to include such small separately fitted details, like these lamp irons and the lamp on the front, which is much more accurate than the one on the HO model, but unfortunately not a separately fitted whistle. This is printed to the front piece of the cab, which just like the HO model comes off pretty easily, so the model can be maintained without taking the entire thing apart. And while I've been giving this model a lot of praise, it is worth noting there are a few things I find strange about the model itself. For example, the side rods are quite large, and while I've seen this be a make or break for some people, for me it's really not. It's just something I happen to notice and that looks a little strange. The lining and detailing on these things comes off super easy, so you have to be careful when you handle them. For a project, I ended up removing all of the lining from the second Thomas I had, and all it really took was taking my nail across the side of it a couple of times. I imagine this would be super easy to do accidentally. The couplers the chassis has are also a little bit large as well, and look even more so when on the model, but I figure that's more of a product of scaling this thing down, and would be pretty easily fixed with just removing the couplers. That's not something I'll be doing, however. I'd much rather see this guy doing some work. Altogether, this model is an easy 9 out of 10. The only thing keeping it from that perfect score being those few things I mentioned earlier. Just a few things I find strange about the model. Price-wise, detail-wise, use-wise, this thing is out of the park. Speaking of price, these things retail for normally about $60 to $80-ish, and in my opinion, that is pretty worth it for a model of this degree. It's super accurate, the mechanism it has runs amazingly, and any modeler of any age is bound to love it. I highly recommend the Bachmann in-scale Thomas. And if we're talking about Bachmann's Best, this could very well be just that. The best Bachmann Thomas & Friends product you can get. At least in my opinion. I more recommend getting the model yourself and coming to that conclusion on your own terms. And hopefully you guys enjoyed figuring, yeah, I'm making another N-Scale Tom. I had to. It's not that I don't like the N-Scale Thomas, but recently Arlo released the little Thommo body shell, and I have been dying to get my hands on one, but I've been more into N-Scale than I have 00 recently. So I asked him if he could scale it down, and he did. Recently printed by Tom T. Legend, I present to you guys the Tiniest Thommo, and to expect updates on this little guy very soon. Just like the other Thomas, I currently have a bracing face printed for him, but for a different reason. The normal Thomas is wearing it because it's one of my favorite classic series faces, and also because it reminds me of the sneezing scene from Thomas and the Magic Railroad, while the other guy has it to commemorate his flat running board, since Thomas would get this after the events of Thomas Comes to Breakfast, so it's more or less a little nod to that, even though the events of such would have technically happened before he had it. I also don't want to paint eyeballs that are that small, not gonna lie, and this has been my second look at the Bachmann N-Scale Thomas.
Roger.
Here goes, sir.
If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe for even more train content. There's always more stuff on the way. And as always guys, thanks again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one.